Good afternoon. Labour says there's a strong case to vaccinate children aged between 12 and 15 against COVID to prevent any further disruption to learning. Ministers have asked the chief medical officers of the UK's 4 nations to consider the broader implications after the UK's Vaccines Advisory Body decided yesterday not to recommend jabs for all youngsters in that age group. James Reynolds has this report.
For many young teenagers in America, the highlight of a travel-free pandemic summer may have been getting the COVID jab. The US, Israel and several European countries have all pressed ahead with vaccinations for 12 to 15-year-olds.
It's difficult to maintain all measures like social distancing, etc. And we've seen earlier on also, for instance, a year ago, last year in the summer, that they are a group which often gets the disease first.
Some parents here are in favour of jabs for all young teens.
If it helps people feel less anxious, then they should do it, especially if they don't have to miss more school.
Are you happy to have your children vaccinated?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because it will save their lives and other people's lives.
But the committee which advises on vaccination says that from a medical point of view, it's not currently recommending jabs for all young teens.
For the healthy children, the risk-benefit balance is really very uncertain and very tight. And normally what we do when we recommend vaccination for children is we see a very clear benefit that clearly outweighs any possible risk. And in the absence of that clear blue water, if you like, between those two, we prefer to advise that healthy children should not for the moment be immunised.
But the committee which advises on vaccinations says that from a medical point of view, it's not currently recommending jabs for all young teens. There are 3 million 12 to 15-year-olds in the UK. Of these, around 464,000 are currently eligible for a COVID jab, either because they have an underlying health condition or because they live with someone who needs extra protection. So the vast majority of young teens then will begin the school year without being vaccinated. Ministers are concerned that this may mean disruptive COVID outbreaks in schools. The government has asked for specific scientific advice on this subject. A final decision is expected in the coming days. In the wider pandemic, though, the 3 million in this young age group may not make the difference. That's because, among adults, there are still 6 million people who've yet to receive their own first jab. James Reynolds, BBC News.
Some GP surgeries in England and Wales have begun cancelling appointments for the winter flu jab after delays to the delivery of doses of the vaccine. A shortage of lorry drivers is believed to be behind the problem. Doctors have warned it'll have a serious impact on workloads and patients and are calling on the government to act. Daniela Relf reports.
The message is clear, but actually getting your flu jab is now riddled with delays in many areas. More than 35 million people will be offered the flu vaccine on the NHS this autumn and winter. But delays in delivering the vaccinations to GP surgeries will now mean appointments and flu clinics are postponed.
I think it could be a real issue for patients and for general practice. And that, of course, if general practice is in trouble, then patients are in trouble. Because it's not just a question of delaying it, it's all the cancellations of the many, many clinics, the many appointments which have already been booked in.
Securus supplies vaccines to GPs and pharmacies in England and Wales. It's warned that road freight challenges have disrupted their work. There simply aren't enough lorry drivers to make the deliveries. The concern is even a short delay could increase pressure on the NHS and ultimately cost lives.
Clearly, influenza immunisation this year is really important. And the reason it's so important is because because of lockdowns, we've had very low circulating influenza levels last winter. And so we do know when there are low circulating influenza levels the year before, often we get high infection rates in the following years.
On top of these latest delays, surgeries are already limiting blood tests due to a chronic shortage of test tubes. Doctors' leaders are critical of the government's handling of the disruption.
We're hearing nothing from the politicians, and the PMA actually is calling for the government to have a COBRA meeting because within the space of 2 weeks, We've seen 2 major crises of cancellations of blood tests and now flu jabs. And we want to hear from our politicians and hear, why are there no contingency plans?
GP surgeries now face managing further delays and cancellations, as well as the worry and anxiety of their patients. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
A police officer has been seriously injured following a collision on the M62 near Goole overnight. North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service said its crews freed the male officer from the wreckage. He's been taken to hospital. Phil Bodmer is at the scene. Phil, what's the latest?
Well, Luxmy, the M62 here near Goole has been closed now for more than 13 hours. Recovery is underway, but as you mentioned, a police officer sustained serious injuries in this high-speed collision late last night. It happened at around 11:30. We understand 2 police cars from West Yorkshire were involved in a collision with a red Seat Ibiza car. You can perhaps see the wreckage from these pictures now, which just gives you some impact of that collision. The police officer was rescued or freed from his vehicle by the fire service, was taken to hospital. There were 4 men in the Seat Ibiza. 2 managed to free themselves. 2 others were freed by the emergency services. 2 of those people have injuries, one including life-threatening injuries, back and neck injuries as well. Now, the Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating the nature of this collision last night, which happened, as I say, just before midnight. Hundreds of people who were on the M62 last night spent several hours in trapped traffic before they were eventually released by the Highways Agency. Now, the investigations continue this lunchtime. Recovery is underway. The police won't allow us to go any further than where we are standing now, but we await further information as to when the motorway will eventually reopen. Luxmy.
Phil, thank you. Let's take a look at some of today's other news now. 2 divers are presumed to have died after they failed to return to the surface while exploring a wreck off the Cornwall coast. The pair were diving around the HMS Scylla, which was sunk in 2004 to create an offshore reef. A major search operation off Whitsand Bay continued into the early hours of this morning. The battle for control of Afghanistan's Panjshir Valley, the final holdout against Taliban control, hangs in the balance as heavy fighting continues. Taliban sources say that they had seized the area, but the resistance fighters they're battling denied this. The fighting is reported to have left hundreds of people dead. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has vowed to toughen anti-terror laws following Friday's knife attack in Auckland by a man who was under police surveillance. The man stabbed 7 people in a supermarket. 3 of them remain in a critical condition. The attacker, a known supporter of so-called Islamic State, was shot dead by police. There have been 3 gold medals for Britain so far today at the Tokyo Paralympics. Hannah Cockcroft triumphed in the T34 800 metres to claim the 7th Paralympic title of her career, while Charlotte Henshaw and Laura Sugar won their events in the para-canoeing. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss reports.
Domination at its most dazzling. Hannah Cockcroft has never lost a race at the Paralympics, and in the 800 metres her supremacy was starker than ever. Cockcroft almost in a different postcode as she crossed the line more than 10 seconds clear.
It's a new Paralympic record.
Behind her, teammate Carrier Denigan took silver, but Cockcroft's 7th title was about as emphatic as it gets. In the canoeing, meanwhile, it was all about the sport switchers. Laura Sugar used to sprint on the running track. Now she's doing it on the water with very impressive results. For Sugar, the sweetest of victories. And there was another for Charlotte Henshaw. At the last game, she won bronze as a swimmer. But after swapping the pool for a paddle, the 34-year-old powered to gold, edging out teammate Emma Wiggs. Changing sports, she told me, turned out to be a pretty good career move.
I feel very, very fortunate to have found another sport that I love. I might have been completely rubbish, so I might not have been even on the team to Tokyo. So it was a complete leap of faith, and one I'm now glad that I took.
In the wheelchair tennis, meanwhile, there was an all-British battle for bronze. Alfie Hewitt and Gordon Reid are doubles partners, but today they were opponents, and after a deciding set thriller, it was Reid that took the match.
He's got it!
And the medal. There was history, meanwhile, for Dan Bethell, Britain's first Paralympic badminton medalist. The sport is making its debut at these games, and while he lost to India's Pramod Bhagat, it is the most special of silvers. But perhaps the day's moment of magic was in the football. The players can't see the ball, they can only hear it. It has a bell inside. So how about this for a wonder goal?
Fill his captain's shoes, what a goal!
Brazil's Nonato sparking jubilation as his spectacular solo effort meant they beat Argentina and retained their title. Truly a golden goal.
Well, there's still plenty of action going on in the athletics, although conditions are pretty appalling. We have torrential rain at the moment here in Tokyo. Now, in the last few minutes, we've seen Kadina Cox in the final of the 400 metres. Cox was the defending champion, but this time she had to settle for 4th place. Remember, Kadina Cox won a gold medal in the cycling earlier in the games. Alid Davis has also been in action in the shot put. Alid Davis, the defending champion, and I can tell you that in the last few minutes he has retained that title, so another gold medal for Alid Davis. Britain now have 122 medals at these games. They'll be hoping there's still a few more to come.
Andy, thank you. Blackpool's famous illuminations are lighting up the seaside town again. Strictly Come Dancing's Shirley Ballas switched them on at the iconic Tower Ballroom, and they'll stay on until January with the hope that the extra 2 months will bring more tourists to the area and give a boost to businesses. You can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. The next news on BBC One is at 5:35. Bye for now.